Right, let's go ahead and get started here. I need to rush you on this visualize in a minute. Well, good evening. I am Stephanie Wade, Executive Director here at the Historic Arkansas Museum, and you all are in for a real treat tonight as we hear from Libby and Olivi Borgognoni, who have dedicated themselves to preserving the history of the Italian immigrants who settled in the cotton plantation of Sunnyside near Lake Village, Arkansas, beginning in 1895, and it is a remarkable history for sure. Libby wrote the first edition of this beautiful book in 1995 for the centennial celebration of the Italian colony, and the second edition was published last year. Libby is the daughter and granddaughter of those who persevered at Sunnyside, and for more than 50 years she has worked to preserve the captivating Italian-American story of Arkansas's Delta, compiling the most extensive collection of artifacts and documents related to this unique heritage. And she and her husband Tony were the driving force in establishing and maintaining Our Lady of the Lake Church and Italian Museum in Lake Village, Arkansas. And Anthony, Libby and Tony's son, is a contributor to the book and president of the nonprofit organization Italians of Sunnyside Foundation, which ensures that this history and of culture and tradition is preserved for future generations. And Libby currently serves as historian emeritus of the foundation as well. But I found it so fascinating, as I shared with Libby earlier, that to learn that more than 1 million Italian Americans can trace their roots to Sunnyside. So I cannot wait to hear more about this. Libby will sign copies of her book in our museum store right out here in the atrium after the presentation. So, Anthony, I welcome you to the podium, and thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you all for being here. Mother, won't you stand up a moment and say hello, everyone?
Stai bene? I said, how are you? And are you all doing well? And I trust that you are. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate the fact that you all took this time during this COVID season, during this terrible stormy weather, to actually come here tonight. I didn't expect but maybe a half a dozen, but I'm thrilled to death to see as many of you that are here. Can y'all hear me? Yes. I'm waving this instead of talking into it. But normally I'm a big mouth, and I am heard quite well. But it's all waning. My time for doing things like this is really going down. So one person who really is as interested as I am in our heritage and our background and all the things that have occurred over these many 127 years is this guy over here. And he's trying to be a lot better than I was with it. So you will enjoy him immensely. And thank you all again for coming. I love each and every one of you. Buonasera.
Well, thank you, Mother. And we're here tonight because of this book. This is the hottest selling book in the state of Arkansas, and it is already sold in 32 states across the nation. And we're very excited about that. And tonight, we want to thank the Historic Arkansas Museum. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Tricia. And all the staff here has been most gracious to host this evening. We also want to thank the foundation itself, which you are all a part of, the Italians of Sunnyside Foundation, which its endeavors to preserve this heritage that you'll learn more about tonight. And tonight, our goal is just to give you a little glimpse, a hint, a little taste of what's in this book. This book is more than 30 chapters. It is over 300 pages, packed with information about our history. and it is 700 illustrations. It has been reviewed by 4 scholars. It has been reviewed by 4 scholars to make sure it is very accurate, and there's been 5 contributors to this book. So it is something we're very proud of, and the work that Mother put into it. And so let's take a little look a little deeper. The first thing that you'll want to ask yourself when you hear about the Italians of Sunnyside is, where on earth is Sunnyside? I've never heard of it before. Well, there it is, right down in the corner in the Arkansas Delta, in the southeast corner of the state. And the biggest landmark in Sunnyside, or Lake Village, Arkansas, is the Lake Chico, the nation's largest oxbow lake. And so if you look up at the picture there, and you can see the water makes a very large sea. And on the eastern side, you'll see the Mississippi River running along on the eastern side of that photograph. So within that circle, as you'll see on the far right image there was the Italian colony. Those are the 250 plots that were set aside for each of the families that were to come to Sunnyside. And each of them were numbered, and each of them were assigned to various individuals of the Italian community. And here on this map, you can see all of the lands that encompass Sunnyside. And that ranged for about 20 miles from north to south and about 10 miles wide from east to west. Sunnyside was one major plantation. So why on earth would Italians come to Sunnyside? And why would they want to work here? Well, some of you may have heard of this particular commodity called cotton. And cotton was king. But what's something interesting about cotton is that in 1790, no cotton at all was grown in the United States. But from 1790 to 1860, it became the #1 export in the United States. Not only that, but it accounted for 57% of the total U.S. export revenue. All revenue, agricultural and industrial revenue, cotton was indeed king. And Arkansas was the #2 producing state in the nation, and Sunnyside was a major cotton production machine. There was over 500 slaves. It was an elite cotton producing plantation in the nation, one of the 10 top largest plantations in the United States, and Sunnyside was famous. And I want to put it in perspective for you how famous and how much stature Sunnyside held. If you look at these companies in America today, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Walmart, Sunnyside was of that type of stature in the United States. And yes, that happened in southeast Arkansas. But while Sunnyside was growing in influence and of high stature, 1860 to 1895, everything changed. The first thing was that Sunnyside, being operated by its labor force from the African American slaves, that created the big Civil War in our nation. And so in 1860, we had the Civil War. And during the Civil War, Sunnyside was devastated. The infrastructure was completely destroyed. Its owner, Elisha Worthington, he died, and there was an ownership fight. And after that ownership fight, and after the Civil War, what transpired is that a company emerged called Calhoun Land Company. And it was thought to be the savior for the South, to rehabilitate the entire South. And actually, it was even mentioned in the novel by Mark Twain, Living Along the Mississippi, Life Along the Mississippi. So the Calhoun Land Company acquired the Sunnyside plantation, and they thought that they were going to recreate the operation and the success of Sunnyside. But unfortunately, the African American slaves had other plans. They wanted to leave Sunnyside. They wanted to leave the South. So the Calhoun Land Company failed. And the Calhoun Land Company had acquired the plantation by financing it through a shrewd New York banker, Austin Corbin. And so when the Calhoun Land Company filed for bankruptcy, it fell into the hands of Austin Corbin. And Mother goes into great detail in the book to set up the scene, set up the background, to let you know of all the factors that are taking place as this comes into being. Now, in contrast, or in comparison, in Italy, during the same period of time, from 1860 to 1895, Italy was going through a revolution itself. And it was a civil war in Italy and a struggle for independence. And so from 1861, actually, Italy became a republic, it became a nation, but the entire country was war-torn. And not only that, it developed into a system of two classes, the nobility and the peasants. And there was a very tiny, small middle class of laborers or tradesmen. But one of the bad things in Italy at that time, you could not own land unless you were a part of the nobility. So this war-torn Italy, there were no jobs, no great outlook, no opportunity for owning land, and it set up this environment for an opportunistic time for Italians who want to get away and to be lured to America for new opportunity. So now, Sunnyside is under the control of Austin Corbin. And Austin Corbin asked that question that you hear all the time throughout America today, and the question that my family has heard many times: how hard can farming be? Just plant a little seed and watch it grow. It's that simple. Well, that's what Austin Corbin thought. He says, well, I've got this massive plantation, so why not just run it myself and make mega money out of it? Because now the Civil War is past, and maybe cotton prices will come back higher, and there's a great need for it because it has been out of production for roughly 4 years during the Civil War. So he puts together a plan to use convict laborers from the state of Arkansas. And Mother goes into this into the book, how all of this was arranged with the state and the contracts with the state. However, there was one big problem. The convicts didn't see any future in it for themselves, and there wasn't. So they really didn't work very hard. So it collapsed in under a year's period of time. So now Corbin, even though he had no success with the convicts, he kept doubling down because land was very cheap in southeast Arkansas. So he kept expanding the plantation. It grew from 6,000 acres to 13,000 acres. And he even needed more laborers than when slavery was there. So Austin Corbin, being an international man and a financier, he had contacts all over the world. And he also had something that was very unique. He had a niece who happened to end up being married to an Italian prince, Prince Emanuele Ruspoli in Italy. And Emanuele Ruspoli was one of the most powerful people in the entire country of Italy at that time. He was mayor of Rome, and all of you know that Rome is the eternal city, and he owned vast amounts of land throughout the northern region of Italy. So Austin Corbin comes up with an idea. He masterminds a plan to establish an Italian colony, and that colony would be the labor force for his newly acquired Sunnyside plantation. So together, Prince Don Emanuele Ruspoli came into a partnership with Austin Corbin, and in 1895, they brought over 100 families, 562 Italians. They arrived in November of 1895, and the following year, another boat embarked in December and arrived in January of 1897 with another 425 Italians. And there was great hope that this colony would be a terrific success. And the Italians were coming, believing that they would have this great opportunity in America. And what you will find in the book, that Mother devotes a chapter to their journey. And she tells the story from each individual, from many families that came here. And you will find yourself, as you're diving through the book, that you'll feel like you're actually on that ship with those immigrants. You'll even feel like you can even smell some of the cargo that was on the boat, because these boats were used as merchant ships to haul cattle. And the passengers, our ancestors, talk quite vividly about what the smell was like, what the food rations were like. And so you can read about what that reality was for them. And it wasn't as they had hoped. They were promised a great, pleasant voyage. And then when they got to America, that the Americans would greet them with bags of money, because the Americans just didn't know what to do with all the money that they had. And this is where they came from, our ancestors, the Italians. They came from the Marche region, the Emilia-Romagna region, and the Veneto region. And what's interesting about Arkansas at that time is that in the entire state of Arkansas in 1895, there were only 100 Italians in the state. And with the arrival of these first two boats of Italians, 1,000 more Italians entered the state and increased the population of Italians by tenfold. And this is kind of what they look like. This is our family. You're related to these people right here. On the left, you'll see the Alpes, then followed to the right is the Borgognonis, and then over on the right is the Petinaris, and then in the upper right-hand corner are the Olivis. And these are our family. I'm related. These are all my great-grandparents, my grandparents. And so this is what the Italians looked like that came. And they had high hopes of establishing a great colony. But unfortunately, quickly after they arrive, as explained throughout the book, a panic occurs. Number one, Austin Corbin dies just 6 months after the Italians arrived. And something more devastating occurred after that. 125, up to 125 of the colonists died. And I want you to kind of understand what an impact that would be. I don't know if any of you in this room have heard of COVID. But does anyone in this room know the percentage of Americans that have died from COVID as of today in the United States? I will tell you, it is 1/4 of 1%. Not 1%, not a 0.5%, but 1/4 of 1% of Americans have died from COVID. So you can imagine what the Italians felt when up to 15% of their entire colony is wiped out by malaria. So a great panic did ensue. So what the Italians did at that time is they all got together. Corbin is gone. Their colony is disintegrating due to disease. The conditions are not good. There's high humidity. And the heat was unbearable for them. The mosquitoes were swarming. And they said, we're leaving. We're getting out of this place. So they gather together and they send out search parties all over the country to try to find a new habitat for the entire colony to move to. And one of the things that will shock everyone in this room, never happened before in Italian family history, when they all came back together and the committees reported on where they should go and move, which environment would be best for the entire colony. They couldn't agree. The first time in history, Italians were unable to agree among themselves. Now, I know all of you, like when you go to dinner or something like that and say, where would you like to go? It's a simple solution. Everybody can figure that out real quickly. But these Italians, this time, could not figure out where they wanted to go. So they ended up separating. And Mother walks you through in the book about the events that led up to how they all separated out and they started moving to different communities across the state. Some you've heard of as Tawnytown. Some went to Hot Springs, some returned to Italy, and some went on to Alabama and across the nation. Other Italian communities were set up. So what happened in Sunnyside? Did they all leave? Well, the plan was for all of them to leave. But actually 20% remained. And I want you, when you look in the book, you have to read the chapter on why some remained. It's a very riveting account of why certain Italians did stay at Sunnyside. But 80% did leave. The founder of the plantation was dead. And so what was going to happen to the plantation? So the son-in-law, Edgar Edgell, of Austin Corbin, decided, okay, I've got to get this out of my hands. So he leased the plantation to the O.B. Crittenden Company. And its major promoter of this organization was a powerful senator from the state of Mississippi, Leroy Kersey. He was a very charismatic individual. There's a library and museum in the state of Mississippi because of him. And he was at the helm beginning in 1898 of the Sunnyside plantation. So now his labor force is decimated. 80% are gone. They were able to, in the book it'll tell you, able to keep some of the Italians there. But now that the Italians are gone, the bulk of the colony, what on earth am I going to use for a labor force? Well, why not just bring in more Italians? And that's exactly what they did. So they started using labor brokers, Italians, who then became merchants in trafficking, if you will, other Italians to bring them to the colony. And these labor brokers worked very diligently, sending all kind of propaganda back to their families back in Italy, to their friends and their neighbors, to get them to come back to come to Sunnyside. Now, something interesting occurred at this time. There were studies being done on labor forces in America, because in America at that time, there was a shortage of labor. And where could we provide the labor force for that? And studies were done about the efficiency and the effectiveness of the Italian laborer. And there are, as Mother will point out in the book, studies that show that the Italian was the most efficient farmer and the most efficient worker in industry. And they were far superior to the Caucasian and the African Americans. So if you want to have a productive workforce, you'd better find you some Italians. And so they came to America, and very quickly they were lured away to other states, to other farms, to other plantations, and other industries. And so many offshoots of colonies formed all around the nation. They would arrive in Sunnyside and then be lured away within months or years to go off and form other workforce, became a workforce for other industries across the United States. Now, one of the things is, so the Crittenden Company and Leroy Kersey said, okay, we keep bringing in these Italians and everybody are taking them away. So we got to keep them here. So they came up with a plan to keep them. Number one was to get the Italians in. So they started paying the labor brokers. We will pay you $25 for a family of Italians if you bring them in, and we'll pay you $5 for an Italian male. And that was very effective. But unfortunately, as I have learned from many people, in fact, many women have claimed that today the Italian male, well, back then was worth $5, that today they're only worth maybe $1. Thanks to Mother's book, the Italian male's value is rising. And I think we're up to almost $7 in value today. So we're very excited about that resurgence thanks to this book. But, so the Italians were here, and the plan was, I've got to keep them on my plantation. And so what they did is they used tactics of fear and a system of peonage. Now, in the United States, when the Italians arrived, one of the things that was very prevalent on their minds was the lynching of 11 Italians in New Orleans in 1891. Now, many people think that the worst lynchings in America occurred to the African Americans. That is not true. The worst lynching that ever occurred in the United States was in New Orleans in 1891, where 11 Italians were lynched in one event. After the Sunnyside Italians arrived, more lynchings of Italians occurred. In 1896, just shortly after the Italians arrived at Sunnyside, 3 Italians were lynched in St. Charles, Louisiana. And then in 1899, 5 were lynched in Tallulah, Louisiana, only 60 miles from Sunnyside. And that news made its way all the way to Italy. As you can see in this newspaper picture, I 5 poveri Italiani, the 5 poor Italians who were hung in Tallulah, Louisiana, just 60 miles from Sunnyside. So there were 6 episodes of lynching in the last decade of the 1890s, and that was well made known to the Italians. And you read about these episodes in the book. So the thing was, the other system that kept the Italians on the plantation was the system of peonage. Now, what is that? So in Arkansas, there was a law that says that if someone owed a debt to you, that person was in your service. So if I loan you $50 to take a cab ride today, under the laws of that time, you would now be in my debt. And you are essentially my servant or my slave until you pay back that $50. That's exactly what was set up at Sunnyside. The Sunnyside Company paid for them to come over, their ship voyage to come over to the United States. It provided them food, it provided them supplies, it provided them farming implements, it provided them a mule to use on their farm for their 12.5-acre plot. And so you were in debt to me. And by Arkansas law, you could not leave until you paid that debt. And because of that system of intimidation, which was against federal law but not against Arkansas law, many complaints went to the Italian government. And the Italian government then put pressure on the Teddy Roosevelt administration to have an investigation of all the atrocities that were being reported to the Italian government. So the Teddy Roosevelt administration, under its Attorney General, appointed a very savvy, a very determined special investigator, Mary Grace Quackenbos. And she came down to Sunnyside with a team of investigators to see for themselves, was there any truth to these atrocities that were occurring at Sunnyside. So, what we essentially had occurring around 1906 and 1908, there was this massive struggle between the charismatic Senator Leroy Percy and the determined investigator, Mary Grace Quackenbos. So the investigation of Mary Grace Quackenbos uncovered unbelievable, horrific stories of cruelty and illegal legal practices, and it was characterized down to the degree of white slavery, as she called Senator Percy in being involved in the slave trade. But Senator Percy had one trump card. Even though Mary Grace Quackenbos tried to enforce laws against him, tried to take him to federal court, those court appearances ended up in the South, and Senator Percy had a trump card. He was a hunting buddy of President Teddy Roosevelt. And so Teddy Roosevelt personally quashed the investigation and recalled the special investigator, and the charges that went out against the Sunnyside managers ended. And the reports of Mary Grace Quackenbos ended up being buried in the National Archives, and they were not discovered until the 1980s, nearly 75 years later, and we learned of all of the atrocities that our ancestors suffered there at Sunnyside, because our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents, in mother's case, and great-grandparents did not talk about these things. They did not share with their children and grandchildren what they had endured. But even though Senator Percy survived the investigation and came out of that fine, he was unable to survive the economic times. And Mother walks you through this about all of the events, many of the events of the Quackenbos investigation, and details for you, many of the things that the Italians suffered and what they endured at Sunnyside during this period of time. So the cotton prices become unstable. The Sunnyside plantation is unable to continue at the level and support itself financially. It goes into bankruptcy. The Great Depression hits, and the land is sold off in many tracts, And the beautiful thing is, many Italian families started purchasing these tracts of land that were once known as Sunnyside. And Italians themselves, here in the United States, immigration was put to a halt in 1923 because Congress decided at that time we had too much immigration, too many foreigners that entered this nation, we have to put a pause to it. So the migration to the United States with Italians came to nearly a screeching halt. So the story ends, but oh no, the story doesn't end because the Italians are here. They are acquiring the land. And the story doesn't end, and Mother continues the story, not only from up to the 1930s and 40s, she brings it forward through today. Because something interesting happened. In the 1930s, Italy is now an enemy of the United States. Italy, Germany, Japan, the Axis powers are now at war against the United States and the Allies. And so during that time, the people from Sunnyside, the Italians that are now there in community, even though they've made it through all of the struggles at Sunnyside, now new bigotry, new hardships come upon them because they are now considered suspicious. Do their loyalties lie with the United States, or do they lie with their homeland and Mussolini back in Italy? So Mother walks us through that in the book and what many of our ancestors experienced during those years. And this is the robust community that survived, the Italians of Sunnyside. Here's a picture of many of our ancestors in the book. Now, in the book, what you'll find is that we have over 2,000 of our ancestors identified. We have a complete index so you can quickly find your ancestors. So this book can be a stepping stone for you to help trace and your own lineage back to Sunnyside and move it forward for your own family and for future generations. So this Italian community that's at Sunnyside that endured from 1895 through the Second World War, they continued to thrive, and they became a part and a fabric of the United States. I know in our own family, my grandfather took him 42 years to become a U.S. citizen. My grandmother, 50 years, and then on Mother's daddy, it took him 30 years to become a U.S. citizen. So while they were here in America and they struggled to survive, like so many Americans have that same story in our history, the Italians persevered and they wanted to be a part of America. They were proud to be Americans. And even though down in Arkansas, actually the post office was commissioned to watch those Italians down in Lake Village, down in Sunnyside. Keep your eye on them. Make sure they don't get out of hand. And you'll read about that in the book. So today, the Italians from Sunnyside, we're not extinct. As Stephanie mentioned earlier in the introduction, there are thousands of families from this original event, this catalyst event. We have over 1 million descendants across the United States, and we're in all 50 states. And one of the things that we try to do, and Mother highlights this in the book, is that the Italian traditions. And one of our favorite traditions is our annual spaghetti dinner. I think this is going to be like the 114th year that we'll be serving that in Lake Village. And everything is made from scratch. You can come down to Lake Village and you'll be a meal that you will absolutely thoroughly enjoy. No other spaghetti dinner is like it. And I've been to every one of them in the state of Arkansas. And I do believe that ours in Lake Village and Sunnyside is the very best. My wife, Gina, and wish she could have been here tonight. She was actually working on this year's spaghetti dinner, which is coming up on March 7th, the first Sunday in March. And there she is right there. She was just making bread the last 2 days, and somebody within that group had come down with COVID, so she's separated from me and all of you for the last couple of days. But that bread is just freshly made this past Monday, and it'll be ready for you come this year's spaghetti dinner. Oh, and there she is there. She wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't make it. Sunnyside today. Sunnyside is the largest, Lake Village is the largest Italian community in the state of Arkansas. Italians are the prominent farmers that own much of the land that was now Sunnyside. It was the catalyst event that brought thousands of our ancestors to America. As mentioned, over 1 million descendants from the original colonization event are here in the United States. And this is a riveting history. The story, I encourage you to read through those 30 chapters. I've read the book now roughly 40 times, and I still cannot grasp it in its entirety. Each time I pick it up, each time I reread something, I learn more, and I encourage you to do the same. We've been here now 127 years. 125th anniversary was November 29th, 2020. Speriamo di vederti presto. We hope you all come to see us in Lake Village soon. We have the Sunnyside Museum. We have the Lakeport Plantation, where you can actually see the life of how people, what they experienced, our ancestors experienced at Sunnyside. The Lakeport Plantation is a very similar replica of what transpired at Sunnyside. We have the Heiner Cemetery, the only cemetery in the United States that is fully dedicated to Italians. We have the great Mississippi River. We have the largest oxbow lake in the nation, Lake Chico. And we have incredible land tours of the Sunnyside lands. And we welcome you all to come there. Many of you have your roots there, and we're so glad that you're here today. We also want you to stay in touch. We continually reach out to the foundation, continue to reach out to our descendants across the United States. We have our Facebook. Our communications director, Shira Kelly, has done a wonderful job. Many of you follow us on Facebook. And every few days we put out more information that's either in the book or supplements the book. And we invite you to follow us on the Italians of Sunnyside Facebook page. Also our website, we just finished a series, a 6-part series on the Quackenbost investigation. And that is quite exciting to read. It supplements exactly what it supplements what is in the book, and we know you'll enjoy that. And we invite you to share the heritage. And one of the best ways you can do that is through this book. And I think it makes a wonderful family keepsake for you and for all of your family to spread the word so people will understand what they came from and what their ancestors endured to be a part of the United States and a part of America. I want to read something that I received in an email recently from Professor Randolph Bain. Professor Bain is the world's leading authority on the Quackenbost investigation. He discovered the archived files that were buried in the National Archives, and Mother sent him a book, and this is what he wrote to me in an email. Anthony, the Italians of Sunnyside arrived today. I'm ecstatic. I've been devouring it for hours. It is beautifully written, generously illustrated, and creatively organized. So proud of your mother. A book that any historian would be proud to have honored. And I have to say, and I'm very proud of all the work Mother has done for 50 years. I want to say thank you to her. Thank you from all of the descendants. She's done a remarkable job. And I'm just grateful, proud to be her son, and she has done something that we can all treasure for posterity, many generations to come. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was taking a look here to see how I've been doing on time. I ran a little longer than anticipated. But tonight, we have some reception that's going to begin now. Mother's going to head that way into the bookstore. If you just want to get a book, she's there to sign. If you brought a book, she's willing to sign that for you. And we have some delicacies, Italian delicacies, we had some Italian delicacies at the reception. We had chicken feet, pig's feet, Italian palm blood pies. But unfortunately, the staff here, Stephanie, they devoured it all before the guests here could get it, which was terrible. But they did leave us some wine and cheese and grapes, so we hope you enjoyed that here. So, Mother, if you have anything to say or add, I'm sorry I didn't give you an opportunity to say anything, but
I want to tell you how proud I am of you. I think you should have been in Hollywood.
all right, Mother, I'm going to have you kind of get up. Everybody keep your seat here. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Mother, let me help you up.
Yes.
And here.
I'm getting to be a young 87 pretty soon.
All right, I'm going to take this.
Looking good too, girl.
I got that, Mother. Don't worry.
A little badge for that.
It's right here.
Oh, you have it. Thank you.
It's on the floor.
All right, so I'm going to hold on to this for you.
We'll get her situated and then we welcome you all to.
And you're going to go to your right one. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
And then
Thank you all for coming. It is just so wonderful to share all of this with you guys. You will like to read that book.
okay, Jane. Thank you all for coming, and if there's any questions, I'll take them. If no questions, or if you're too shy to ask a question, I understand. You have a question? Yes, sir.
How many farms came out of Sunnyside? Do you know about that when they first started selling it all?
How many farms came out of it? You know, I can make a rough estimate. Right now, Sunnyside Valley was 13,000 acres. A part of the plantation, the biggest part, is 700 acres. And then several other farmers have like 500 and 600 acre tracts. But if I were to take an estimate, there's probably 10 major tracts from it, and there's probably another 10 or 20 small tracts,
Do
parcels.
you think Lake Hall farm?
Like what?
Lake Hall.
Lake Hall.
So excuse me just a minute, I just want to say, you don't have to keep talking, but if you want to come, she is seated and ready.
Okay.
People, so
Lake
you want to
Hall.
come on out.
This one with the dance.
Oh, yes. I don't think so.